Today, actually, this entire month has been Autism Awareness Month, right? And
Yep.
so, you guys just saw the podcast that we just released with Lori Harris at Superpowers for Good, and Lori's coming back on, joining me today to just talk a little bit about more. We're going to just dive a little bit deeper. So, Lori, welcome back.
Thank you. Thanks for having me back.
Yeah. So, I got some things here, that we could sort of talk about, and then, just kind of share with people, and go a little bit deeper. So some of the things I'm looking at here: ADHD and teen drivers, ADHD and anxiety, test taking tips for nervous test takers. That's one that I know a lot of people, I mean, including myself. I get all, I forget everything when I take tests. Two steps forward, three steps back. The problem with compensatory strategies, and then the importance of integrated primitive reflexes for struggling learners, and then you have here hands off games and strategies to overcome ADHD and ADD. So that's a lot that we can talk about. But before we get started, for those people that have not, they don't know your story, they don't know your background, just go ahead and share a little bit about yourself, for those folks before we jump in.
So I have quite an eclectic background. I came to Georgia in, I think, 2012 and worked with Hope Park, helped build the playground along with the Clarks. We started our world school. I was there for 5 years. And like everything, sometimes you find something that you're just really passionate about. And so this developmental visual learning that we do, I started studying that in, it was either May or June of 2019, and I learned something new every day. But it's the foundation, like, of so many learning struggles and so many labels, ADHD,
Right.
autism,
Yeah.
ADD, oppositionally defiant kids with learning struggles, so dyscalculia, dysgraphia, dyslexia, all of these things. And it's such a foundation, that it really makes so much difference. And with
Right.
ADHD, we have so many people that don't get diagnosed. We get some that are diagnosed, but we get so many kids that grow up to be adults and they have ADHD, and they don't know what to do, and they come up with compensatory strategies. And these compensatory strategies are typically the wrong ones, right?
Right.
They
Yeah.
need to rethink. But I kind of got a little ahead of myself. So I started this program, created a company called Superpowers for Good. And again, that was after my daughter and my grandkids, because we always had to tell my daughter to use her superpowers for good instead of
Yes.
just bowling through life. We wanted to have her go in a great direction, and she has. And so we're getting started on that. Superpowers for Good. We educate educators. We train trainers to go back to the schools and educate the teachers, especially teachers that work with children with special needs. And then we work clinically with children and adults, to help
Right.
them with autism, ADHD, ADD, ODD, all of those things, whatever they
Yeah.
have.
So, Lori, you mentioned a lot there, and a lot that you've been doing, in the past, and now where you are with your company today. So, let's just start. Well, the question that really jumped out to me when you were going over your background was, you talk about kids and adults that struggle with ADHD, and all different forms. Let's start in the schools. So, how 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 are how can the kids' parents cope, in schools? What are some strategies that you can, or some things that you would do, if they're going to, I mean, they're at Henry County schools, they're going into schools, like, what are some things that you would recommend?
That's a kind of a loaded question. So most of what I do with kids is play games, but they're very specific games to balance their visual system. And so, um, we're going to have to dive into that, I guess,
Yeah,
first,
yeah,
right?
yeah.
So, and I know eventually we're going to talk about understanding the science behind meltdown. So I got to talk about this anyway. Um,
Right.
your brain, when it develops inside out, bottom to top, back to front. And that's important because the primitive part of your brain, the first part to develop, is the amygdala, right? And
Right.
so that's your fight or flight. It's the crazy part of your brain. It's the part that reacts without you thinking
Where's that
about it.
on here?
Okay, so so it's the center of, like, you see the brain stem on the other one over. Yep, it's right in there in the brain, in the primitive part of your brain.
Right.
Perfect. And so, yep, and so that's just the part that you get. It's what we used as cavemen, right? So when we
Right.
go out and we go hunting as cavemen, we had to have that capability, because if we didn't hunt and know what was going on and react quickly, we would become the hunted.
Mm.
So it was very important to have that. Who else would need that? Are people who are in the services, police officers in dangerous conditions. They would need to know that.
That's right.
And then you have your prefrontal cortex, and that's the last to develop. And that's where you create imagery, and it's the logical part of your brain. So when you're having a meltdown, people that know how to use their imagery, they can actually, a lot of people say, talk themselves down from the ledge. They don't talk themselves down from the ledge. What they do is they draw on images and experiences in the past in
Right.
order to be able to calm themselves down. And so that's really important. And then your visual system, because all of this balances on the visual system. And we talked about this in the last podcast. Every time I talk about it, anytime I talk to anybody, I kind of go through this. So 80% of everything that comes into your brain comes in through your visual system, which only leaves 20% for, excuse me, combined of hearing, touching, smelling, tasting, right? So it's a
Right.
big portion. And you've got your central field that comes in, and everything there is color and detail, fine detail. And then you
Right.
have your rods, and everything that comes in there is depth perception, motion, big picture, black and white. So the rods and the cones send information through. It goes to the back of your head, to the occipital lobe, your visual cortex, and it comes back to your prefrontal cortex in two streams. The
Mm.
left side, and I'll make it easy for you, left side, right side. The left side goes through Broca's area of communication before it gets to the prefrontal cortex. The right side goes up and over dorsally through the superior parietal lobe before it gets to the prefrontal cortex. And when everything is working simultaneously, you get imagery, and that's the moment of knowing, right? It's really
Mm.
important. That's when you have visual dominance, that's when you're ready to learn.
Right.
So the left side is area of communication. So if anybody has a problem there, we know that's going to show up with language, speaking, communication. The right
Right.
side is everything else. It's ADHD, it's oppositionally defiant children, it's learning struggles. And that's the side that needs to be taken care of for all of the kids who have ADHD, or all of the adults who have ADHD. And so
Right.
what we do is we actually play games designed to have them pay attention out here and here, because you have to
Mm.
toggle back. You can't be in both places at once. You have to toggle back over
Right.
and over and over and over again, right? Many times a day, many times a second. And so with kids with ADHD, um, you really just want to have them learn how to expand what they're paying attention to. And
Mm.
that's as simple as it is. It is how they pay attention to the
Right.
information that's coming in through their visual system.
So let me. I mean, and I think we talked about this last time, right? And a, a lot of people are being prescribed medication, right? For their kids in this. They don't need the medication. If they are, learning how to do this through the exercises and the games and what you're taking them through, they really don't need that prescription. Is that, would you say that's correct?
Yes. So once a person learns how to attend and toggle back and forth properly,
Yeah.
then they don't need the medication. So what happens is a child with ADHD is here, right?
Right.
They just focus on their central field, their attention. And
Right.
so they don't see the big picture. So everything that they do, they have to move from one place to another. And it's very sequential and not simultaneous. My son had that problem, and he had to learn how to move out here. And once that happened, well, he was never on Adderall or Ritalin. We didn't have him on that. But once that happens, they're just able to take in more information simultaneously. And it's funny because we tell kids with ADHD to focus. The
Right.
problem is they are focused, but they can only
Right.
focus on one thing at a time. And it
Mm,
becomes very, very difficult. And
mm,
so if you know a kid or an adult with ADHD, you know somebody who's probably brilliant, because in order for them to be able to do that in that way,
right.
is it's just a lot of brain power. It's just a lot of capacity, a lot of processing. And so what happens is when you have ADHD, like I said, you're right here, but you need to be able to toggle back and forth, and probably like 85% of your life you should be out here anyway with
Right.
quick checks with your central field. So what Adderall does and Ritalin does is, well, let me go back one more thing. So what happens is when you get stressed or you don't know how to attend here, you collapse your field, and so you end up here.
Mm,
What happens is Adderall and Ritalin actually chemically do the same thing. So we're trying to get kids out here so they do better, learn better, have better lives. And what's happening is they kind of go in chemically being suppressed, so they're not paying attention to this field. So they
gotcha.
feel like they can do a lot more. They feel more focused, but they're
Right.
missing so much. And
Right.
the
Right.
interesting thing about that, if you want to take a second and talk about ADHD and teen driving, first of
Yeah.
all, teenagers between 16 and 19, way, like, I think it's 3 times more of a chance that they're going to have a fatal accident. That number is going to be wrong
Wow.
because I can't remember it off the top of my head.
Right.
But if you think about it, first of all, teenage drivers aren't really that great anyway because they don't have the experience.
Right.
But
Yeah.
driving is a right side, a magnocellular activity. So you have to be out here a lot. You have to have all of this depth perception, all of the motion that's going on, and then they're not, and they're serially, sequentially
Right.
sampling everything. So as an example, I had my granddaughter in my car a couple of years ago, and it was just when McDonough had the scarecrows coming out. And
Yeah.
so I was
Mm,
trying to, she doesn't live here, so I was trying to tell her what they were. And I was the second car in line. And I stopped for a second to show her. And then I started going forward. And then without realizing it, I just slammed on my brakes. And thank goodness I did. My periphery caught it, but this person just blew through a red light. Had I
wow.
not been able to stop in time, even though I had not consciously seen that, you know,
Right.
they would have creamed into the car and she would have been in the side that got impacted and probably killed. And so
Wow.
the magnocellular side, the right side of your brain that sees all this motion,
Right.
is really important when you drive. Well, then we also have kids that get put on Adderall or Ritalin, and now they're driving. And it's funny because even the attorneys will tell you, oh, if you should be on Ritalin or Adderall if you're driving with ADHD. Not true,
Right.
because if you're chemically suppressing this, they've lost all of this that they need
Mm,
when they're driving. And
that's
so
right.
it's really
That's right.
important to get kids and adults, quite frankly, um, balanced to where they can toggle back and forth and manage their visual system to get through life easier.
So let me ask you, like, how does someone even know? Like, how do you know that you have this issue? Like, what are like identifiers that maybe parents, I don't know, early on, or or even as they get into teens, it may be slight, or it may be, how do they know the depth of, there's something there, and we need to get this checked out.
So sometimes it's really easy. You've got the kids that fidget all the time, they can't stop moving, they have impulsive and inappropriate behaviors. Um, my daughter will hate me for this, but when she was in fifth grade, we didn't know she had it. And when she was in the fifth grade, she took her hand and she was like, "Hey, what's on my hand?" And this is her friend, and she's like, "I don't know, what is it?" Like popped her right in the head, and she got in trouble. And
Right.
so that kind of impulsive behavior is kind of a hint. Um,
Right.
Learning struggles. Kids with learning struggles often have maybe not necessarily ADHD, but it's still the same side. It's still the same thing that you're dealing with.
Right.
Difficulty following instructions. Oh boy. If you
Yeah.
have a kid and you say, "Lincoln, go upstairs, down the hall, and behind the green towels, get me the Alka Seltzer," the kid's not going to know. He might get
Right.
upstairs and he's not going to remember. And the reason
Right.
they don't remember is because they are trying to remember. They have no imagery of it. And so they're
Right.
trying to remember your words. And if I give you a list of words, I might get to six or seven. You might remember seven. You might remember six, and probably the first one I said. But the rest of
Right.
that stuff isn't going to
You don't.
stick.
That's right.
If you have
That's right.
imagery and you say, "Hey, Lincoln, down the hall behind the green towels," you're picturing it. You're in there,
Right.
you're grabbing it, doing whatever, right? Your green towels might be different than mine. Your hallway might be different than mine, but you're seeing it. So a kid that cannot follow multi-step instructions, probably a good sign you've got ADD or ADHD.
Mm,
Um,
mm. That's
Time
interesting.
management. Need I
Yeah.
say more? People with
Yeah.
ADHD struggle with time management,
Yeah.
um, and they they have a hard time paying attention for any length of time. So if something requires a lot of mental effort,
Right.
they're done, right? They're
Yeah.
not
That's
going to be
it.
able to
Yeah.
stay
That's
there.
over. Yeah.
Yep. And the kid that loses things, or adults, right? The kids that loses everything,
Yeah.
pretty good sign. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of ways to tell, and those will fit. Like that was Mackenzie, right?
Yeah.
Hunter just had he had focus issues and he had clumsiness issues. He'd trip and fall and he couldn't catch a ball. It hit him in the face. He couldn't see through time and space. Mackenzie's manifested itself differently, so we didn't know to look for it. But
Right.
she lost everything. She left everything everywhere. All right. We literally nicknamed her Snail for a while because everywhere she went there was something left. And we'd say, "Hey Mackenzie, go pick up your stuff." And she'd pick it up,
Right.
one or two things, and that was it. She didn't see anything else. She didn't know it was there. And it was very frustrating. And so if you have
Right.
a kid and you're trying to get things done, if you're frustrated because they can't follow instructions, they lose things, they don't turn in school assignments, even though they do it, and you're just about ready to pull your hair out, that's when you know.
Yeah. Yeah. Not that's so, man. You think about some of these things, and when that happens, you're thinking, you know, not that it's not normal, but it's like, oh man, this kid's just not listening. I mean, and like you said, parents get frustrated, and you know, that's so important. The reason when you said that, because for parents, I guess when you understand and these things, or some indicators, then you can sort of step back and say, okay, well, maybe I shouldn't be getting upset in this moment. Maybe there is something deeper that we need to look into, without you know yelling at the kid, or get, man, that's so important. That's a great tip, for parents that are, you may be frustrated, or trying to figure out what's going on, that it may be something there that you need to look further into. So man, that's
And
that
as a
that
parent,
thank
yeah, and as a parent, I went through that and
Right.
didn't understand. And we tried everything. That poor kid didn't have a cell phone most of her senior year.
Right.
We would sit down and we would talk to her, and I get it. I agree, and I'll do better. But here's the thing: they don't know how to do better. They want to, but they don't
Right.
know how to do better. And until they
Yeah.
learn how to manage and balance and be able to toggle back and forth, they're not going to. And the longer it stays, the more deeply embedded the habit becomes.
Right.
And then it's hard to break the habit and re embed a new one. It's not impossible, it's just more difficult. So
Right.
for adults, for little kids, we just trick them into playing games and learning, and they don't really understand what we're doing. We just play games. For
Right.
teenagers and adults, we actually stop the world and we say, this is what's going on. And we oftentimes ask them, what is your thinking strategy? How did you get here?
Right.
So I had a kid in here the other day, and I gave him some quick math problems. And 6 plus 7 is always a hard one for people unless they just know it visually. And he sat there for a minute and he was very quiet. And he finally wrote down the answer. And I said, great. How did you get that answer? And he wouldn't tell me. And I said, well, really, you got it right. Just please help me understand your thinking strategy. How did you get it? Because obviously he took way too long to be able to know it
Right.
like that.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
he was so cute. He finally fessed up that, and he had his hands, it was barely perceptible. He's like, I got this trick. And so when adults are around and I don't know the answer, I do this. And I'm like, okay, perfect. I'm glad to know that. And,
Yeah.
so he's an older child and he's, counting on his fingers. And then I said, okay, can you do the next one without your fingers? And he said,
Right.
sure. And he starts putting dots down on his page. And so,
Yeah.
he is showing me his thinking strategy,
That's
and
right.
it's the wrong strategy. It's
Yeah.
absolutely the wrong strategy. So we'll go back and we'll help him learn how to do that visually, because math builds. And if you don't have good foundation,
Right.
you're going to have a hard time with math.
It's
You're going
yeah.
to end
Is
up
it? Yeah.
doing
Yeah.
bad.
Right. Right. Yeah. That. I mean, this. I think, Lori. You need to be, and I don't know if you are yet, or how that's happening, connected with so many of these schools, because I know there are kids that are struggling, especially in math, and like you said, not being able to visualize certain things, and counting on the fingers and that kind of thing at an age when it should be visual. So, are there any plans for you to, like, um, connect with the schools, and really help some of the students that are there? I mean, is that even a possibility?
Well, that would depend on the schools, and
Yeah.
how open they are to something different. Um, it's a completely different strategy of learning
Right.
than what people normally do. So this is the natural way that kids are supposed to. Every human develops the same way. Their brain develops the same way. So we
Right.
start in utero with primitive reflexes, balance being the first one, and then we're born. These primitive reflexes actually help us through the birthing process. And then between 2 and 12 months, all of these primitive reflexes should be integrated. And a lot of times, and that's a whole nother story. I think we have one on there, the importance of primitive reflexes. Um,
Right.
because if you don't have certain ones, I mean, we talk about dyslexia, bedwetting, auditory processing disorder,
Hmm.
um, all kinds of things, motion sickness, things that you wouldn't think would be
Yeah.
caused or could be caused by having not having integrated those primitive reflexes. Super easy, can do it in about 30 days, if you're
Right.
working on these exercises, and then you don't have to worry about those problems anymore. But then you go to movement touch. That's your toddler, right? People call them the terrible twos. I call them the terrific twos, because these kids
Yeah.
then are discovering and enjoying learning, and it's really great. They're touching everything, but that doesn't last forever.
That's
But
right.
it's so I call them the terrific twos. Then it goes to auditory, verbal, and then finally visual. And
Mhm.
once a kid becomes visually dominant and knows how to use their visual system, that's when they're ready to learn and they become eidetic learners. So often
Right.
something happens where um, you just have something happen and you go back from visual down a step to auditory verbal. And so
Right.
many kids, I think because they're not ready to learn yet, but
Right.
we demand that they learn, right? And we're trying to
Mm.
teach them earlier and earlier. And so some of these kids aren't visually dominant, they're not ready to learn, but then we're making them learn, right? We're
Right.
requiring them to learn. And so in
Right.
order for them to learn, they have to go back down to their auditory, which is the next one. And some of them have to go all the way back down to movement touch. And so we're kind of creating bigger problems if we if we had a preschool
Right.
in a perfect world, we wouldn't be worrying about teaching them colors and numbers and letters. We would be teaching them how to use their bodies
Mm.
properly. We would make sure that all of their infantile movement reflexes were integrated. And then
Right.
we would play games with them until they became visually dominant enough to learn. And that's when we would introduce the things that we want to in
Right.
pre-K, you know.
Right.
So, but back to the question of schools,
Right.
we have plans. We are creating plans to train people in different locations. So, schools, um, places that deal with any kind of kids that are in trouble. We could do it in prisons. You know, we could do it almost anywhere, including restaurants and businesses and all kinds of things because we can well, that's another story. Won't go there, but we are doing that. So we're putting together these training programs. Some of them are already put together, and we're just building our training programs so that when we have the opportunity to go in, we can go in and teach people what we do
Right.
hands on with them, and then they can teach other people in the school. And so,
Gotcha.
yeah, we hope that
Gotcha.
Henry County is interested. We're getting ready to talk to Fayette County. We're working on
Yeah.
Fayette County right now. So,
So let me ask you. So as let's see what the question was. Like, okay, so you mentioned being able to start early, in the preschool and really getting the kids prepared to be visual learners. Like, what is the time frame? Like, what can somebody expect? Like, if their kid starts in preschool, or say they may be in second grade, or they may be in fifth grade or ninth grade, or a senior, like, and they start, what does that process look like? Is this something that is lifelong and you just got to keep doing this, for the rest of your life? Or does it get to a point where, you say, I don't know if you put a number on it and you say 3 months, 6 months, a year, whatever, or everybody's different? What does that look like?
so everybody is different. Younger kids are easier to work with because they're unformed clay, so they don't have as many deeply embedded maladaptations or bad habits. The
Right.
older the kids get, the older the adult gets, the more deeply embedded these maladaptations become. So, I work with somebody who's 65 and is brilliant, um, but he's also very deeply embedded. And
Right.
so it's going to take him longer because he has to actually stop, break the habit, and then rebuild a new one. And so, how that works is basically, and I think we talked about this on the phone the other day,
Yeah.
when you start building a habit, you're like, it's like tromping through the woods. You're making a trail, but it doesn't really make much of one. And then
Right.
you walk through it again, and then you walk through it again because you want to go down to the creek. And then you want to take your friends. And so you tromp through it some more. And so pretty soon there's like a path. And then pretty soon the path is really developed. And then you go in and you pave it or gravel it, and then you pave it. And then it comes a 2-lane highway. And then finally you've got this super highway in your brain, through these neurons, and that becomes your go-to. Whatever highway or habit you give the most attention to, that's the one
Yes.
that's going to be your default. So
Right.
as you're building these new habits, these new thinking strategies, the one that you used before becomes in disarray, disrepair, because it's not being attended to. So it kind of crumbles and goes down and goes down and goes down. And
Yeah.
so you don't have to keep doing these exercises all your life. you just have to know that if you get stressed and if you allow them to bubble back up,
Hmm.
if you start attending to those, what's going to happen is this one is going to go up and this one will go down. And
Yeah.
so my son was a perfect example of that. He stuttered very badly
Yeah.
and he went through this program. Excuse me.
Bless
And
you.
for him, it was 6 months. He was in this program for 6 months, completely
Right.
stopped stuttering. His physical skills became much, much better. Um, but in college, he got super stressed. You know, college
Right.
is a big deal. He was at Georgia Tech and he got super, super stressed. And he came home one weekend and he said, Mom, I don't know what's going on, but I feel like stuttering. He said, I haven't, but I feel like it. And he's never, I mean, even now to this day, he hasn't
Right.
stuttered. And so what
Yeah.
I did was I sent him downstairs. The drums are a great thing, right? Lots of multitasking. Um, and I sent him back downstairs and I said, just go beat on the drums. Keep beating on the drums. We sent a little thing. We couldn't send his drum set to Georgia Tech. So we got him a little drum thing and he kept doing that until that urge passed. So he he didn't know it, but he inherently kind of understood this is wrong and I don't understand it.
Right.
And so when he came home and asked, it was just really easy to say, don't attend to that one. You know, keep this one here. So that's what he did. And
Gotcha.
so for a little kid, you know, depending on what's wrong, it could be 3 months, 6 months. For an adult, you know, don't know. It,
Right.
it just
Right.
depends on how well the kid um, receives the information and then uses it. But typically,
Mm.
what happens is even if we work for with a kid for like 6 months and they go off somewhere, they've
Right.
learned so much and they learn that it's easier to do it
Hmm.
visually. Everything is easier to do it visually. And so they kind of
Right.
gravitate for that and then they keep progressing even after they've
Yeah.
left,
Yeah.
which is
That
really kind of
that
a great thing.
makes sense. Makes sense. So I wanted to touch on the test taking tips for nervous test takers. That's right up my alley right there.
Are you a nervous test taker?
What I I I believe that I am. Yeah, because I would have to, for me, I had to read things multiple times, before I get it. And then sometimes when I go into a test, it would just be gone. It's like, you know, I studied for this, I read, I was ready to go, and then I get there and it's like gone. And I'm like, what in the world is going on? And I'm like just staring at the question like I know I noticed, but I can't. I don't know. And so it just takes it took me a while to just sit there, and I would always run out of time when I'm taking tests. For the most part, I would run out of time because I would just be sitting there, especially like the SAT and that kind of stuff. I'd just sit there and just look at it and like, all right, um, I went over this, but I can't remember anything.
So did you do the popcorn method where you just picked one?
Just picked one and just went through it. Yeah,
Okay, so two things for you. Two things. Um, One, you're not a visual learner. We've talked about that.
yeah,
You could become one, but you had different thinking strategies growing up, and so that's what you did. Secondly, every time you took a test, your amygdala was firing,
mm,
and when you're and we'll talk about this in a second, but when your amygdala fires, it's like it has this magic where you can't have all the information connect in your brain.
right, right,
And so you're just like, except for you, it wasn't fight or flight, it was freeze.
yeah,
And so
yeah,
when we talk about test taking strategies, and I love working with teenagers on this because, first of all, they come in and we had somebody working on a circle in geometry and she just couldn't get it. You know, here's this um, sentence that describes a circle. And
yeah,
so we sat her down and we showed the center point with equal points all the way around it, right? And then she saw that
hmm,
it was a circle. So we
right,
went from a verbal explanation to a visual explanation. And so, and it can be in any category, but we put together visual curriculums. And then when we're doing it, we have a game called Spots. And I wish at some point we had a place where I could actually like show you this because it's really cool. But
Yeah.
it's in a spatial array. It's like 12 spots, and anything goes in there. So it might be the presidents, and so let's say it's 1 through 10. We've got the presidents, and they learn the picture, visual. They
Right.
learn the name of the president, verbal, auditory, verbal, and
Hmm.
then they have to do a gesture for the president. So Washington, Adams, Jefferson, they have a thing, right? And then
Right.
we play all kinds of games. So we might start with, um, if I give you the gesture, you have to tell me the name and you have to stomp on it. Okay, so then it
Gotcha.
becomes Jefferson, and they say that and they stomp on it, and it's in the 3 o'clock position. So now they know it's the third president, and so they play. They can do it forwards, they can do it backwards, they can go up, odds, evens, down, doesn't matter. And then we can switch image maps. So they could do all of the presidents that way. They get to learn it,
Right.
but that's not enough. And they learn it really quickly, by the way. But that's not enough. We take balance out of the equation. So we might put a bean bag on their head or put them in a balance board. It's hard on the
Wow.
balance board if we're making them move. Or we'll add a metronome so they have another load. And then we'll make them snap every time they say a name. Or we'll have them recite them and they have to do jumping jacks at the same time, or they have to do some kind of crossing the midline. So what we do is we build all these loads, and they know it. They know
Right.
the information. And then they go to school, and who cares? Because
Right.
I've already put you through way more. So you can
Right.
sit there and you go, "Oh my gosh, this is so easy." And
Right.
so
Right. Right.
yeah, and
That
so
makes
instead
sense.
of sitting there and, "Oh my gosh, I can't do it," it's,
Right.
you know everything visually and you can do it. And it becomes really cool because you're that kid that gets like 100% on all your tests.
Yeah. Oh
And
man,
so,
that's great. That's
yeah,
great.
so once you
I
learn
should
how
have
to
had
do
that when I
that,
was in school.
yeah, I wish we had been around when you were in school. I
Too
would have
late
loved to
now.
have helped you. No, it's never too late. It's never too late. You may not have to take any tests, but you still may be in a place where you get under a lot of stress, and that amygdala fires and you kind of just
Yeah.
stop.
Yeah. Yeah. What I do now, like um any stressors or anything like that, I typically just I literally just get up and walk away. Um, you know, I- because it gets to a point it's overwhelming. So, I'll just get up, I'll walk away for, however long, 10 minutes, 15 minutes or something, and then I'll come back. And,
So can you
it
guess
kind of
what's
because I
going
guess I've
on?
reduced my stress. Yeah.
Yeah, can you guess what's going on when that happens?
No, tell me.
Okay, so we talked about here and here,
Right.
right?
Right.
And so this stream, it's called the magnocellular stream. I'm still talking about right side, right?
Right.
So there's two streams. So as you get stressors, as there's more things coming in at you, you have to do more things. The phone's ringing, you got kids crying,
Right.
whatever.
Right. Right.
Um, what happens is you can't deal with all that sensory complexity. So your magnocellular stream, that field, this periphery field, space and time, collapses. And the more you have, the more it collapses, right? And so
Right.
the problem with that is that that's the only stream of the two that can actually take a detour. So it comes
Mm.
in and takes a detour right up through the superior colliculus and hits your amygdala right into the
Mm.
primitive part of the brain. And it hits the amygdala, and oh boy, right? Lots of things happen then. It,
Yeah.
it via the hypothalamus, it tells your pituitary gland there's a problem. And your pituitary
Right.
gland is the queen of all hormones, and she doesn't like that at all. And so she yells down, "Release the kraken!" And that's exactly what happens. It shoots information to the adrenal glands, just above the adrenal glands, or the adrenal glands were just above your kidneys. I'm trying to show you, I can't show you. And
Yeah.
they're like, "Yeah, we get to play." And they shoot catecholamines out throughout your body. And so all of a sudden, you have a rapid heart rate,
Right.
because it's prepared for fight or flight response. So a rapid heart rate gives you more blood to your muscles so you can run faster or you can fight longer. It
Right.
increases your lung capacity so you can breathe, same thing, fight or flight. It it just pummels your body with sugar for instant energy, and really interestingly, it dilates your pupils
Wow.
very shortly, but it dilates your pupils so you can see better to run. Um, and that those catecholamines take 17 to 20 minutes typically to course through anybody's body when they get an amygdala fire. And
Wow.
there is nothing you can do about those catecholamines until they go out of your body. And so
Wow.
what we see meltdowns, what we see are meltdowns. We see a kid
Right.
in the restaurant that just had one too many complexities in his world at that moment,
Mm-hmm.
or road rage, a person that just goes nuts for some reason on the road, one
Right.
too many things just hit and he couldn't manage it anymore, or
Right.
the mom who's been home with the kids all day and she's cooking and cleaning and she's doing everything, taking changing diapers, and then
Right.
the dad walks in. She's had it. She's like all day, and the dad walks in and says, "Hey, honey, what's for supper?" And she goes, "Wah!" Like everything just explodes for her, and he's like, "Whoa, what happened?" But
Right.
that's what's
Right.
going on physiologically with people when they have meltdowns, and they can
Right.
be
Wow.
huge meltdowns or they can be smaller meltdowns. You've learned how to deal with that by getting up and de-stressing and walking away.
Right.
Most people don't have compensatory strategies for that. And so that ends up being a meltdown.
Yeah. You know what, Lori? I mean, I hear you talking about. th- To me, this seems like everybody, right? Everybody has something. Like
Yeah.
everybody has something that they might have found some way to deal with it, or to you know push it down, or whatever it is. Like, so that's why I'm like, man, it's amazing how all of these things that you are saying are so connected, and but people find ways to deal with it or cope with it. Man,
Yep.
that's amazing. So, all right. So I wanted to touch real quickly on two steps forward, three steps back. And you talked about the compensatory strategy, some of those strategies. Do you have anything else that you could kind of share, some other strategies that might help folks?
Again, it's all about the foundation of your visual system, how your body is, really how your brain is maturing, um, and and look, it's nobody's fault, right?
Right,
If
right,
you're not integrated, if you've retained your spinal gland, it's not mommy's fault, right?
right.
It just happened for some reason as you were going through. You just didn't integrate it. Um,
Hmm.
it the way we teach kids, we teach kids on demand. So if they're not ready, we're still demanding that they do that. And when we can't teach them the right way or visually,
Right,
what happens is we apply compensatory strategies, and so um, we will do things like, instead of 6 plus 7 being 13, we'll do 6 plus 6 plus 1,
hmm,
or
yep,
7 plus 7 minus 1. But it slows us down. Like, we're not going to be
right,
as fast in math because we'll still have to do that. Or if we're teaching them how to do things like, I know I can be flying with writing an article or doing whatever I am, and I get to the word receive, and I can see it visually, but I learned it I before E except after C.
hmm, hmm,
And I stop and I say that to myself, and then I go on and type it, right? And
right,
so what I'm saying is 2 steps forward, 3 steps back. Is compensatory strategies, while they seem to work in the present, in the immediate, they develop they develop maladaptations that you tend to carry with the rest of your life. And
right,
those maladaptations typically slow you down, or hinder you in some way. And so the only thing that I can say is, some people are really fast with their compensatory strategies or their maladaptations. But the only thing I can say is that the way to get rid of those things is really learning your visual system. And it's just about where your attention is when you're doing things. So,
Right.
can you toggle back and forth very quickly on demand? Not even on demand. It's not a conscious thing that you do, but can
Right.
you do it back and forth all day long? And can you maintain a good balance? And so it really is just about learning how to do that.
Mm. Yeah, man, I this look, we've talked about so much, covered, quite a few of these topics on here, and I wanted to find out from you, like, is I know if people have watched the previous podcast, they know how to get in contact with you, but I'm looking for ways on, if someone needs to get in contact with you right now, because I know of all that we've talked about, somebody is experiencing something right now, or their kid is experiencing something right now, and they just don't know where to turn, or they don't know who to talk to, or where to go. They've talked to the teachers, they've had how many tutors, or they've just come to their wits end on, like, I just don't know what to do. So just talk a little bit about, again, just, anything, just in wrapping up, like, for people to get in contact with you, and what are some things that, maybe they can start to do before they get to you, maybe.
I think what people can start to do is just pay attention, because when they do get to me, I'm going to be asking a lot of questions because
Right.
out of mom's mouth comes diagnostic gold. If we listen, the mom will tell us exactly what the kid is doing, and she may not understand what they're doing, but
Right.
we know. And so pay attention. And if you think that there's a problem, then you give us a call. And
Yeah.
I have a cell phone number. It is actually going off right now, but it's on silent. And
See,
that is,
somebody's calling you already.
yeah, they don't know the number. But it's a cell phone number. It's 231-360-3469. Um, I answer my phone. I answer texts. I don't mind texts.
Yeah.
I prefer to talk to the parent. And
Right.
then after I talk to them, if they think that I can help their child or them or their husband or their brother or whoever, um, then then I say, okay, we can schedule an assessment. They come
Yeah.
in for the assessment. It's a couple hours long because we're testing all kinds of stuff. Interestingly enough,
Right.
it's not the kinds of things that you think we're testing. We're testing how they're using their visual system. And again,
Right.
it's not 2020. It's not acuity. It's how they attend to hear and hear. Um,
Hmm.
and then we write up a report. We bring them back if they want to start sessions. Um, then we get them on the schedule and we start sessions and we start playing games.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, that is, that's simple enough, and easy to do, and you made the steps, really easy. I do want people to definitely reach out, to Lori, and because what she's doing, like I said, every one of us have some sort of experience, with dealing with things that we kind of push down, and brush off to the side, and really, it's the struggles that you have to deal with on a daily basis, and the stressors that you have to deal with, especially in kids, um and in schools, and they are feeling a lot of stress when they see their friends, being successful in math, or whatever it is, and then they're struggling, and they're thinking, what, I'm just not that smart, and have to settle, for thinking that. So, um Lori, any thing in wrapping up that you wanted to share?
I would just tell you because you came up with a really important point. One of the things that I see all the time with children who have ADHD or learning struggles is their lack of self esteem
Mm,
and their lack of resilience. And
right,
so when they come to me, they are afraid to fail, but they
right.
think they're going to fail, and fear often makes that happen. And I'm
Yeah,
here to tell you that every kid and adult that I've ever met and worked with these learning struggles are really brilliant. There's
right,
no reason for them to feel like they're less than their friends or they can't do something. And so
right.
that I think I hate it when kids have to come to me and they just have such bad self-esteem. We don't need
Right.
that in America. We don't need that anywhere. We need to have these kids feel good about themselves, be confident in themselves, and
Absolutely.
grow up and be really productive people.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely.
and they can be, and they don't
Yeah.
have to struggle.
Right, right. Yeah, that has been, that's way heavy on me. For especially the kids, and what they have to go through and being teased and and all of those things. And like you said, by the time they get to you, a lot of them are broken. And you just got to put them back on demand. But the good thing about it is, superpowers for good will always be there to help to mend the brokenness. And like you said, we don't need a lot. We don't need a lot of kids that are in this area that are broken. But if you can get to Lori, as quickly as you can, and help your kids out, help yourself out. And we can really make some change and do some good. So I truly appreciate you for coming on, Lori, and
Thank you.
sharing and just diving deeper into this, because it's such an important topic that we kind of just brush off to the side and really don't pay that much attention to. So I'm glad you're bringing a lot of awareness, especially in the community about this.
Okay. Well, thank you so much. I enjoy always speaking to you, Lincoln. So
Same
it's
here.
always fun.
Same here. I appreciate it.
Thanks.
All right. Take care.
You too. Bye.
Bye.